Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us for another interview in the Esoteric Interview series. Today we're interviewing Ethan Indigo Smith, a Taoist, occult reject, and author of multiple books like The Geometry of Energy, The Matrix of Four, The Fourth Initiation, The Tao of Thoth. The purpose being to expand our perspectives on non-Western esoteric practices and to study the diverse ways magic is being used. I believe you also teach Tai Chi as well, right, Ethan?
Yeah, yeah. I've shared various attachments to Tai Chi, like Qigong, if you will, and I sometimes associate these Qigongs so much with Tai Chi that I might call them Tai Chi, but they're technically Qigong, and the Wu long form, which is counted as 108 movements. One could count it as, you know, 360 movements or 10,080 movements. It's counted as 108 movements, partially, I think, as recognition with the connection with Taoist and Buddhist practices that kind of unfolds with Zen and Chen meditation practices. These are kind of a fusion of Taoist and Buddhist ideas, as is a lot of Tai Chi. And that number is metaphysically and mathematically significant, if people haven't looked into it. And I became obsessed with that and wrote a book about it too, 108 Steps to Be in the Zone. Um, and yeah, so I definitely share Tai Chi. Before the pandemic, now was a while ago, I was sharing much more in person. When the pandemic hit, I started sharing much more online, obviously, as the pattern of everyone kind of happened. And now I got so busy with other work, I have not necessarily been teaching, but once a week online, the long form to just a few students.
Yeah, that's awesome. I do remember seeing that book of yours. Um, what's the difference between Tai Chi and Qui-Gon? Just
That's a great question. Tai Chi is actually a simplification or the shortening of Tai Chi Chuan, and Qigong. The words in Tai Chi and Qigong are actually different words. Though in the West, we've kind of adopted Tai Chi to be the same word as the word in Qigong. So Qigong, essentially, it has the word Qi, which we're all familiar with, and Gung, which we might be familiar with as recognized rather with Gung Fu, same word. So Qigong is the practice of the development of Qi. And Tai Chi Chuan, it's actually a Ji, not a Qi. Tai Chi Chuan is a Qigong, technically. Not all Qigongs are Tai Chi. And Tai Chi Chuan means the grand ultimate long form or long fist. And the word Taiji is from the same word, of course, that we know as Tao. And Tao actually, the Daijitu or something like that, is actually the Mandarin word for what we call the Yin Yang symbol, or what is actually the grand ultimate symbol in Mandarin, basically, is what that means, or rather, the grand ultimate pole. or grand ultimate polarity. And so Taiji Chuan is the grand ultimate polarity long form, or the Tao of movement, if you will. So Tai Chi, as we know it in the West, it's actually across the world would be the most popular martial art in the world. It's by way of it's the most practiced. That doesn't mean it's necessarily the best martial art in any terms, but it turns out it is the grand ultimate martial art among people that are looking for um, not necessarily art that's limited to martial applications. Of course, Tai Chi is much more practiced for its healing and grounding. And of course, I joke for its wizard-like properties, right? I jest, but it's the most popular martial art because it's essentially a secular meditation. It's variously known as in the East. And again, this comes from pertains to folks that had monks that would pursue meditation, and life really takes over everyone else's pursuits. But Tai Chi Chuan was close to this kind of meditative life, a secular meditation. In fact, yeah, I think that explains what the words mean. But it's really with all that said, Tai Chi Chuan and Qigong, and by extension yoga, they're really self-development pursuits, right? On self-development processes.
Thank you. Yeah, I noticed a lot of the books that you've written um, revolve around like meditation, energy work, and geometry. And so I'm
Yeah.
wondering, how do you incorporate geometry into your, spiritual esoteric practices?
Yeah, well, I have long been obsessed with the duality of polarity, as I call it, or a trinity plus one, or the four, if you will. My first book, I kind of lay out four archetypal characters, and it's a very exoteric book. And I kind of have written a lot with if it's not overtly about the four, symbolism that is related to what is really this powerful set of four aspects across time and space. It's really quite interesting how often it's utilized. Not that other numerological, symbological things are not utilized as well. But I was in Sedona, and I was discussing um, meditation with a friend, and she was explaining to me this meditation that she had learned, and it struck me as being the language that she was communicating with was quoting the teacher of this meditation, and the language struck me as being overtly related to the four dimensions of geometry, and that is the point, line, plane, and solid. And again, I'm obsessed with four and sets of four. So I'm constantly going over things by way of this framework. Um, so I don't think necessarily her teacher might have even outlined this meditation teaching with that in mind. And she didn't know really what I was talking about. And so the conversation shifted, but it the idea like nagged at me that evening, especially, and for the weeks in advance after this conversation, where I started to conceptualize meditation in a fourfold manner relating to the four dimensions of geometry. One, there are many different facets to this in different traditions. But as I was researching it and exploring it, and again, with an obsessive amount of other sets of four in my kind of pattern situation observation reference of this research, I started to realize that not only is it a meditation process in many different traditions and many different meditation instructions, it's also a way to enhance sensitivity to energy. And one of the first sets of four that I realized was I haven't seen this mentioned before I put it out there, though it may be mentioned before. One of the first aspects of this subtle energy recognition quality to this four dimensions of geometry understanding is looking at the tarot. And the tarot, of course, has the four suits. And these really do illustrate the four dimensions of geometry, not abstractly at all. The sword is the point, the wand is the line, the coin is the plane, and the cup is the volume. So this really struck me as a secondary quality of the geometry of energy was that it's kind of, in this case with the tarot, it's has a divinatory kind of aspect to it, but in sensing energy, even in a martial sense, there is a formula for this kind of subtle energy recognition in it. But with the meditation process, the point is concentration. The line is connection. The primary aspect of a plane, as I see it, in other words, rather the most used in nature and the most high-end form of a plane is a circle. Just like in tarot, the plane is a coin, and so the cup is the. Forgive me if that phone is coming in. So there's concentration, connection, circulation, and unity expansion. And again, different, once you recognize this kind of quality, you'll see it in different meditation instructions and so forth. So it's, yeah, it's a really profound link to all kinds of different meditation techniques. Not that there aren't other meditation techniques, but it is within these practices.
When I think of the number four, I think of the material world a lot. Think of it as a material number. I wonder what you would think of that.
Sure, it is it's definitely symbolic for Earth. I feel like in the material realm, and it really, in that sense, there's kind of a basic format. Of course, the four elements is a widely understood not so symbolic, but symbolic understanding of 4 being a symbolic of completion. There's also kind of a mathematical, philosophical format that kind of breaks down this completion of it. And this was a quite popular philosophy for hundreds of years before other different systems took over or were presented, and it became less popular because it's so simple and so primary. The Katskoti philosophy from India, the Greeks call it the tetralema. It is essentially this mathematical format where there are 4 possibilities: A and B, and AB, the combination or synthesis of the first two, and X, the unknown alternative. And this is actually in direct format. I believe certainly why it was so popular at one point. It's in direct format with. Uh, it's impossible to not be a meditative and esoteric symbol. And although there are exoteric, perhaps understandings of it, the oldest symbol on planet Earth that is not even spelled out, it's so old, the Om symbol, is based on this tetralema format of A, B, A, and B, and X, and in the manner following, which is there is 4 aspects of consciousness that it depicts, and that is basic wake state and sleep state that we usually go through on a day-to-day basis, and there's deep awakening and deep dreaming. That are, it's of course also very much set up in the duality of polarity, as I call it. And it's maybe again one of the oldest kind of formulas of it. And of course a symbol, used for meditation, and at the start of every meditation from the East is the Om. And it is seen, of course, overtly as a tripart vocalization. A, U, M are the overt sounds, but the 4th is silence, very much equivalent with the deep dreaming aspect of consciousness, and the X, of course, in the tetralema.
So you're talking about A, B, and then the relationship between A and B. Would that mean kind of like this meaning that's created from the relationship between the two? And then X is an unknown.
X, I call X the nullicis, right? So there's thesis, antithesis, synthesis, and nullicis. And it is the grand ultimate unknown, or whatever you want, in a sense, or just the unknown consideration for not being stuck in what they might refer to often, or what we might see often, as this Hegelian dialectic, right? So when you add the X or the nullicis, you completely remove what is this kind of trapped thinking or flawed schema of thesis, antithesis. Okay, we can't agree on either of those. Let's form a synthesis. Well, what about the X? And forgive me, what was the first part of the question?
I was wondering if A and B, and then that relationship between A and B, which is that third option, is that kind of signifying like a meaning, like those are two principles, and then there's a meaning between the two principles. I was thinking in terms of like Pythagoreans, I guess.
Right. Well, it can be anything, right? Of course, these can represent anything, and I consider the third aspect as kind of the combination. Although sometimes we'll find that there are three aspects, and these combine into a fourth aspect. Um, there's 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 different ways to look at it, but yeah, I think definitely the contrasts idea leads to better understanding. Something that's been coming up recently is that I've been looking into recently and hearing others discuss is the divided line. And it is essentially another example of a duality of polarity, if you will. There is reality and real reflections of reality. And there is theory and reflections of theory. These are kind of the four things going on in the divided line. Um, so yeah, it comes up so often, and I think each set of four is kind of a helpful tool. And also, I found, for me at least, understanding the different sets of four help me understand. Um, I'm on a pod. I'm on a podcast for a little bit. Is that okay? I'm on a podcast. I'll call. I'll be right there. Pardon me. Um, so yeah, it helps knowing the other sets of four help help enhance the potential tools of the other sets I found.
Very interesting. So I guess before we get too far into it, I haven't asked you yet. What kind of got you started in your spiritual journey, or how did all of this really start for you?
Well, I've always been spiritual. As a youth, when I could barely read, uh, and mostly was having people read to me, I became obsessed with Siddhartha. And I really found that book really fascinating. That might have influenced me, but I also kind of always had a spiritual pursuit. And my parents were essentially hippies, and they made the decision to not uh, indoctrinate me, if you will, into religious observance and have me explore on my own. And although both my parents were very instructive and I had access to all sorts of different teachings, or not necessarily all, but a lot of different books and so forth. But they were pretty adamant about not being adamant. And so I grew up quite curious about things, even despite and maybe due to not being presented with a religious identity of sorts. So I've always been interested in religion and spirituality and the esoteric and occult. And I've always also been anti-institutional and not into being identified with a collective of sorts if I can get away with it in one way or another. Um, Proud to be an occult reject, though. That's a different type of group, and I mean just groups. And yeah, shout out to the crew, and it's like been really enjoyable to meet people like you and everybody. So I've always been into spirituality, and I don't know necessarily what really kind of got me onto an esoteric path, but I started practicing Tai Chi when I was about 21. And that is, of course, quite an esoteric practice and pursuit. And I find, forgive me, I find it's a, an interesting way to understand different systems in life and different esoteric teachings on its own. It's a really helpful practice. So I guess a big instigation in my life for really choosing to get out of the rat race, if you will, in a permanent sense. Like when I was 21, I was a snowboard bum. I was basically living in Tahoe and trying to snowboard 100 days a year. But also in that respect, I would work really hard during the summer and also try to learn on my own. And so the snowboarding led me to the Tai Chi, because once I tasted Tai Chi, I realized how immediately effective it was for my athletic pursuits, even when I felt completely discombobulated and confused trying to practice it. It actually, in some respects, the confusion of practice rather than just the knowing and practicing is almost more beneficial, or has its own benefit really. So yeah, Tai Chi practice the physical aspects, and then following that with the philosophical aspects, I might have started to get into spirituality that way. But the big instigation for getting out of the rat race, even though I was already a snowboard bum, was the uh, 9/11. And that really inspired me to start seeing things in a different manner. Um, and since then, I've been, I would say, pursuing understanding things in a better exoteric viewpoint and a better esoteric viewpoint as well.
Is there any other frameworks that you integrate into your practices? I mean, you know, I believe I've heard you speak about the Kabbalah before. And obviously, as an occult reject, you're introduced to so many different ideas. I just wonder, do you ever branch out?
Sure. And I find that my often I will obsess over certain different ideas for until I kind of run through them, or maybe that's impossible for any idea. But until I feel I've kind of grasped things or at least answered the question that I'm looking for. And certain topics, the esoteric and occult, especially relative to uh, uh, Chinese and Taoist traditions, and in the East, especially by way of the teachings of Kemet and Greek, they're kind of unlimited. So I find I have endless curiosity for these things, and I probably will. But I do kind of obsess on certain different ideas at times. Definitely, someone asked me one time, when if I learn Tai Chi from you, well, and I already know this yoga and this other martial art, should I what should I do with those? Like they're only going to make your Tai Chi better. You bring everything you know into what you're doing. So Tai Chi and Taoism, by extension, is all about integration, whereas more monothematic systems might be prohibitive about that. I don't think esoteric uh, practitioners and occult people who study the occult and spirituality think that way in general. But some people do. So I'm all about integration. And maybe one reason why there are so many different types of Tai Chi forms, and even within the different branches of forms, there's so many different ways to practice Tai Chi, and they're still yet called the same form, is because it's all about individuation. It's all about what they brought in before that and learned about. And it's another reason, or another aspect of all this, is that Tai Chi Chuan has no belts, because it's all about an endless learning process, and keep going. You learned the form, you're just starting. So it's all about practice, and repetition is the only way for refinement, right? So yeah, it's Tai Chi is very helpful for enhancing what one already practices and knows, whether it's baseball, physics, or esoteric studies, or martial arts. As I mentioned before, it's the most widely practiced martial art. It's not the best martial art, but it makes all better. And whatever you're doing, it enhances your ability and potential.
So, okay. I know, like in Taoism, right? It's the idea of becoming one with the cosmos, right? Would you say that's uh this individuation? I guess how do you use Tai Chi in order to self-develop? Is it its movements and its energy work, but is it also like visualizations and
It's all those, and I always recommend to just even let all that go. For it is very much being in the present. And there's a notion in Taoism and Buddhism of grasping and seizing. And actually, in Tai Chi, we're always grasping and seizing. It's a martial art, right? But in life, the more we grasp and seize at a thing, the more we're likely to have it just squished through our hands. So it's kind of the intention of no intention. The removal of intention allows for the ability to be present, and this basically is, makes other things subpar. Often can just be present. So, and intention, it has the ability, the potential to kind of make us not present. And so I was saying earlier how confusion can be really rewarding, in a palatable experiential sense. Um, Learning new movements allows us to connect with ourselves a bit more, and again, just be present. And at first, it's like a seriously humbling experience that I think, turns off people of the East and West mindset, because it is not a finishable, quantifiable thing. It's about an endless, like, you can't be perfect, you can't reach perfection with the form, but you can get really close and closer and closer. So it's I'm starting to ramble, I guess, but yeah, it's helpful to really enhance one's abilities, with that little kind of asterisk of that it often doesn't work the way we think it might, the way other things do. And in that, Tai Chi is all about softness and this not grasping and seizing, but it also enhances the spectrum of our ability to be either soft or hard. The potential for flexibility is enhanced. And so when one does focus on and have intention on things, it's actually more powerful. And but in the practice itself, it's all about just being present. And all those things can be tools in practicing the form. Also, they can also be utilized while you're practicing. It's actually a visualization practice just in itself, right? Because in the beginning, we might practice battling our nemesis. I sometimes joke our least favorite politician, or our true nemesis, right, is ourself, right? So it'd be a person looks like you, as tall as you, it's you. So a part of it is actually visualizing, taking on a bear is another thing that you can battle, taking on this really big powerful being, and you're also at the same time moving hyper slowly, but it's also quite exertive. So you end up um, producing, say, a percentage of the same chemicals that you produce in runner's high. All these great chemicals that influence our body and our potential and our nervous system and our subtle essences, as the Chinese might say, in a really positive manner. But we're not even running. And so the need for these chemicals to heal is actually kind of utilized to enhance. It very much is anecdotally like that. I don't know if it's scientifically like that. So yeah, it really has the ability to get a lot of quality circulation just by the imagination and the visualization. But again, yeah, the more powerful mindset is just right. Like the Taoists essentially have the reaction of no reaction. Right? Just are you happy or are you sad?
I
Like
like
just
that. I love that what you said about, you're your enemy. Your enemy would be you. It made me think of that movie. It's an A24 movie with Jake Gyllenhaal called Enemy, and it's basically like this guy that just looks exactly like him just kind of moves into his town, and it just makes you think of that,
interesting.
like, yeah, what would you do if another you was there? I mean, it's a
It's
interesting thought experiment. Um,
I've also
but
had that encounter where I've come across or I'm kind of adjacent to someone else that like people say, "Oh, that I thought that was you," or and then random patterns like that. They're like, "Wait, who?"
yeah, part of it is like, oh, competing with yourself would be, you know, why is that so threatening? I don't know, but it is. But you had mentioned, okay, so these movements and visualizations and like learning these movements can help you come to understand yourself. I was wondering if you could give an example.
Well, what I mean by that primarily is that we realize inevitably some people are more athletic than others, dancers and people that might have you know martial arts experience or athletic, they can catch on. Even even them, inevitably, it's going to be kind of a new experience. And even me, I've been practicing Tai Chi a long time. When I go to practice another form, it's so baffling and confusing and difficult. And so this really puts us in touch with the little points of tension in our body, right? That we might, after becoming aware of, get through a little better. And that brings me back to my point about having an intention. An intention is in tension, right? It has the word, or the enunciation, if you will, tension, and it's in. So an intention, it creates tension. A tension is a tension. It's the opposite of tension, right? Again, it's only an enunciation are they the same, but I'm saying that in the thought process and in the energetic quality process, they're definitely the same too. So bringing attention to how we're moving, and those little, wait, I hurt my shoulder. That was 5 years ago. Is that? Yeah, that's that. Okay, so maybe I should. Can I ground more and bring it in together? Yeah, you can. Yeah, I can bring attention, and it actually is the opposite of attention. So understanding these little, little ticks of how we might move, and little static in trying to be smooth that we might have, we realize more about ourselves. It's like the ancient lesson, know thyself, right? As soon as you know thyself, as soon as you're sensitive to how you move, you become much more attuned and sensitive to how others move, right? And this is definitely useful in base martial terms, but it's also useful in social constructs, to the being sensitive to how someone's moving. You can understand their potential force emission in a martial construct. You can understand their potential thinking pattern and emotional state too. You can be it's another. I mentioned that Tai Chi is sometimes called secular meditation. It is also sensitivity training. And we're from a culture where we don't seek sensitivity, and where we even actually align it with flaws. Like, oh, you're so sensitive. Well, beyond that, being sensitive means being intuitive, and or just understanding what is going on. That is not a bad thing. Sensitivity is a really good quality to develop through any practice, but it's the a focus of Tai Chi. And yeah, it can be physical and visual and even psychic, of course.
I love that. Okay, so yeah, it's like building a somatic intelligence almost, but also that somatic intelligence is like, yeah, it does build that sensitivity, doesn't it? It really made me think of a Carl Jung
and
quote
and
that,
in that, oh, great, what yeah,
well, I'll look it up maybe at the end of this episode because
okay.
I am so curious what you would say about it. But what were you gonna say?
Well, I love Carl Jung. He definitely is a window into my interests into spirituality, and of course, is one of the many great teachers that verifies my obsession with four. He was super attuned to the impactful nature of the four among the collective consciousness, going so far to repeat this innumerable times. There are three, but where is the fourth? Um, So there are many sets of three that actually we might reveal there has been a hidden fourth or an unsaid fourth aspect. And Jung was very familiar with this among all his great teachings.
What if
So
it's a
yeah,
pyramid?
sensitivity. Well, a pyramid. What pyramid? Which one?
I mean, just the general shape.
Well, the pyramid. There are many different pyramids that have different coordinations, but bug out on this: pyramids are four sided. Generally, not all, but pyramids are four sided. Um, and the Great Pyramid of Egypt actually has a four pair attribute to it, an eight, um, in a sense. And there's a parallel with and Chinese systems is this one, two, four,
Oh no,
and so on from there.
you cut out for a
Um,
second there.
oh, I was saying that there's a lot of parallels with the Chinese systems, probably all influenced from Egypt, but it may have been co-arising, as they might say. But there is the eight neaters, or what's known as the Ogdoad of Egypt, and there are eight beings, but more specifically, four pair of beings. And in these, I find are in correspondence with at least the elemental perspective of the Bagua of the Chinese system, where you have the eight uh, fold symbol of the eight elements, right? Which you might, the eight trigrams, of course, right? Another divinatory system. I mentioned the tarot before, has it how it corresponds with the four dimensions of geometry. The Bagua is another, of course, the oldest book is still in still in print, is the I Ching, they say. And it was brought to Chinese Taoist. The story goes, it was brought to the world by Fuzi and Nuwa. And Fuzi and his counterpart, the feminine Nuwa, is the Thoth iteration of the Tao. They are snake bodied, and they're these teachers of all wisdom and so forth, from fishing to divination. And yeah, they're the wisdom teacher of the East, um, and brought the Bagua. And so there's relationships, I think, with the Neeters of Egypt and the Bagua of the East. And to the pyramid, yeah, the Great Pyramid is four sided, but with a slight kind of understanding that there's actually eight in an abstract, eight sides, because of this indentation that each middle has. You might say it's five sided because it has a base, right? The base of the Great Pyramid complex is probably more extraordinary than the pyramids themselves, because it's been able to hold up these great buildings. Um, so, so pyramids are, you might say, four-sided, but they of course have the triangles. They have those four planes of the three-sided triangles. And so the three and the four become super intimate in symbolic terms, I think, which leads to, I think, the 12, right? There's the fixed, there's the three different type of, you know better than I do, but that, I think, is in there, the three and the four in the astrology.
You know, I'll pull up that Carl Jung quote really quick. Just
Yeah.
um let's see.
Yeah, he has some
Apologies.
great ideas and many no, don't be, that's okay. And many different relationships of this duality of polarity, or the three and the fourth. Of course, in its most primal um, set, I find, is the depiction of the Om symbol with its three and the two main aspects of consciousness are really something we're running all the time. The third is noted to be a higher modality of athleticism and or creativity. You're in the flow type of thing, whereas the fourth is like very few people reach it. Are you going to read it?
Yeah. So, he said, there is no need, I think, of further examples to show that the concept of RTA is a libido symbol like sun, wind, etc. Only RTA. So RTA is like the is I'm trying to remember which culture it's from, but it's basically just like this cosmic order or mat kind of idea, is
Okay.
less concretistic and contains the abstract element of fixed direction and regularity, the idea of a predetermined ordered path or process. It is therefore a kind of philosophical libido symbol that can be directly compared with the Stoic concept of uh, high Haymarmene. I'm sorry, I don't know, which is
Sounded right.
she is the goddess of I'm blanking out on what she's the goddess of. Um,
No
uh,
familiar.
I talk about it more in this post, but this is so long ago, and like you, I get obsessed with things, and then you
Sure.
know. Okay, but for the Stoics, she had the significance of creative primal heat, and at the same time, it was a predetermined regular process, hence its other meaning, compulsion of the stars. Libido as psychic energy naturally has these attributes too. The concept of energy necessarily includes the idea of a regulated process, since a process always flows from a higher potential to a lower. It is the same with the libido concept, which signifies nothing more than the energy of the life process. Its laws are the laws of vital energy. Libido as an energy concept is a quantitative formula for the phenomena of life, which are naturally of varying intensity. Like physical energy, libido passes through every conceivable transformation. We find ample evidence of this in the fantasies of the unconscious and in myths. These fantasies are primarily self representations of energetic transformation processes which follow their specific laws and keep to a definite path. This path is the line or curve representing the optimal discharge of energy and the corresponding result in work. Hence, it is simply the expression of flowing and self manifesting energy. The path is RTA, the right way, the flow of vital energy or libido, the predetermined course along which a constantly self renewing current is directed. This path is also fate. Insofar as a man's fate depends on his psychology, it is the path of our destiny and the law of our being.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And this, alchemy has a four and a three in it too, right? The four elements and the three elements. What do they call them? The three sulfur, salt, and mercury. And
Yes.
so they this is kind of like a process thing too, right? Geometry has a very much an energetic process to it too. That is like one of the first geometrical rules, if you will, and it's definitely, I think, relates to energy too. You can't have a line without points, right? So points make up lines, and lines make up planes, and planes make up solids or spheres. Each one has a requirement for the prior to kind of truly manifest. Um, this is in Buddhism, definitely, and I think by extension, maybe in unwritten terms. Although I think other esoteric teachings have their philosophy set up and an unsaid or unknown widely aspect of it as a meditation tool. And the four immeasurables of Buddhism are an example of this. This is a philosophical way to understand things, in this case, love, but it is also a way to understand, or is also a formula as part of a meditation. And it's very much, it reminds me of the format of geometry. The first aspect of the four immeasurables is love for self. And you can't have love for others if you don't have love for self. Just like you can't have a line without the point. And the next, so there's love for self, love for others, love for the happiness of others, and love for all things in equanimity. And it almost works exactly in the same formula as the geometry idea. So I think a lot of times there is a fourfold system to meditation processes, in part possibly because four is about the number that humans remember and just count without like much thought. Once it becomes five objects, it requires counting and becomes a little bit more critical memory to putting forth the you know this number, this to remember them. Four is known in a psychological sense as this limit of that we just kind of, it's automatic recall and automatic count. And speaking of counting, there are of course the four forms of arithmetic that really form a basis of course the unlimited nature of mathematics. And there were probably a lot of people went crazy looking for the fifth form of arithmetic, and they never found it. So basic mathematics uses arithmetic in one way or another.
So that that goddess was representing of energy kind of unfolding in time. I'm wondering, like,
Hmm.
as you have you grow your somatic intelligence, do you ever feel like there is um like some energy paths are more natural to some people than to other people? And even more so, do you ever find that maybe you have like certain energy blocks or uh, almost like our bodies can tell us something, and those parts of our bodies being, symbolically representative of, um, higher principles, if you could almost use that for individuation as well.
Yeah, great question. You know, in a sense, Tai Chi is the nervous system workout. I like to say, when people know what I'm talking about, that it's a work in, because it's internal arts and it can be quite invigorating physically. But it's essentially a way to facilitate and exercise the nervous system. We don't concentrate, although we're using, we don't concentrate on muscular and tendon systems per se, and even in being sensitive to our alignment, we're actually kind of thinking about our bone structure, because when we get our bone structure in alignment, everything else kind of can set into place with gravity, if things are correct. So yeah, Tai Chi is a nervous system workout. Um, and some people may have not really enhanced their nervous system that much. Uh, and maybe they facilitated good health through muscular exertion and cardio exertion. These are definitely good ways to stay healthy. Of course, Tai Chi, it is different, because instead of like cardio works on, or running works on the cardiovascular system, Tai Chi, again, it goes directly to the nervous system. When our nervous system is in a relaxed state, and when we've gotten rid of some of these points of tension, these hang-ups in our body, we actually can emit more potential force and more quality work, whatever it may be that you're doing, um, with more ease, right? So when our nervous system is performing at a higher rate, the skeletal, muscular, cardiovascular system that we have works more efficiently. Um, and Tai Chi does use the muscles. It more works out, or works in, the tendon system. And another advantage of the Tai Chi, or Tai Chi like movement, for working out the nervous system and the tendon system, the tendons can emit like 8 times more force than a muscle. That's why, like, when you look at a horse, its ankle is like, not my arm, maybe a little bit thicker, but it's basically bone and tendon, but it's a horse, right? And it's the reason that it has so much strength in this little bit of its body, is because of tendon strength. So working out the nervous system, getting through these blockages, which if we aren't recognizing that we might have blockages, go get a massage. You will realize how tense you are. Or go to a Tai Chi class. You will realize that you're holding tension. And something that we're always trying to do in Tai Chi practice, when we're learning in our first class, and every time we practice on our own, is getting into a relaxation ambiance, right? We want to relax. And again, that's part of the expansion of our nervous system potential. Relax, right? Most people are holding on to so much tension, their shoulders might be like 2 inches higher than they need to be, and they don't even realize that they're holding their shoulders so high, or any other number of postures we may hold tension in. We are super tactile beings. We are very much animals. This is why we get sore backs. We're animals in the process of evolution. We've only become quality upright beings very recently in evolutionary terms. Our hips, our backs, and that whole section in Chinese is called the Qua. We get sore there because we're not upright. We're not really made to be upright. We're just kind of making our way through the evolutionary process right now. So getting into a place of relaxation and knowing our alignment and posture helps us get through all experience. Um, and and we're super tactile, and we are athletic animals. And when
Sorry,
we get
Ethan.
into a, yeah,
You cut out for a second, but you had said it helps us get through, and then the rest of that
um,
sentence.
right. So we're basically going through this evolutionary process right now, and that's partly why we can be so sore. And Tai Chi helps us balance and get through this evolutionary process of uh, uh, standing beings. Right, we're in the process of, and being get finding alignment and finding ways to relax in our body enhances our sensitivity, and I call it our periphery awareness. You start to be hyper without intention. You start to be hypersensitive to one's surroundings, and this perimeter awareness expands physically. And I know this word is a red flag for people, but metaphysically too. Um, of course, not here, but um, so this perimeter awareness really starts to expand once we're in touch with ourselves and more in balanced and in tuned and sensitive to what's going on. Gnosis, know thyself, right? And then that it starts to enhance knowing things around oneself. I'm like, whenever this sensation of like someone's watching you and you turn around type of thing, you get hypersensitive to that type of thing, and you notice how people move, right? One of my teachers told me early on in my learning that he could tell how adept a person was just by how they did commencement, the first movement of Tai Chi. Often, most, if not all, the forms have a commencement posture, which is essentially just up and down, raising the hands up and down. There's a push. There's different things that go on, but um, and when he told me this, I was like, I was a young, kind of critical idiot. But I'm like, I don't believe that. But I mean, it's obvious that one becomes really sensitive to how people move, and how people are, kind of subtle sense too. So it's interesting that relaxing and being tactile actually enhances the sensitivity to subtle energy and even psychic phenomenon. I would say this is an indirect effect of Tai Chi, and in Buddhist terminology would be known as a siddhi, right? A I don't want to say it's a magical effect, but you get into a state where you're sensitive to things, and thus more aware of things, if only.
Like you kind of become more sensitive to cycles and you develop a foresight almost.
Well, and it almost isn't even necessarily foresight. It's just knowing that on this certain path you're on at this time of year, the pine cones are going to fall, and if you walk over there, they're not going to fall on you. I know that's a silly example, but it's just being in tune with things just at a real simple level often enough that allows us to make really simple observations. There's a joke about the Tai Chi practitioner. There's a fight at the bar. Who wins, the Tai Chi practitioner or the drunk at the bar? Well, the joke is that the Tai Chi practitioner was not there, right? So you kind of get an awareness of, oh, like it's about to go down. I'm gonna get out of the way. I'm not gonna be here. Or you can manage situational confrontations in a different way. Like, oh, are you upset? Let me buy you a drink. I mean, this is not necessarily always the way we want to deal with hostility, but there are ways to maneuver through hostility.
So, um, let's see. Do you have a book that you're most proud of? Because you've written a lot of books. Yeah, I'm just wondering.
Wait, say that again. I lost you for a sec.
Oh, you have written a lot of books. Uh, maybe, I mean, how many do you think now?
I
14?
think, yeah, 12, 14, something like that. And a few of them are quite small digital books. But a few of them are certainly are full length books. Yeah.
Do you have any that you're most proud of?
Well, I my intention in authoring and sharing, I always want to instigate consciousness, and not necessarily like dictate certain things, but have people be more conscious as they carry on themselves. I think that's a Tai Chi lesson too, right? A big part of Tai Chi and other systems. Tai Chi is on your own, right? You just have to. You definitely need a teacher and instruction of other sorts, personal instruction, the best. But you got to practice on your own. So I want to make people, be conscious on their own, I guess, too. The My most recent book, The Fourth Initiation, I'm really proud of. The Tao of Thoth. I published that the November of the demic, like right 2 months after that was the pandemic, and I was trying to link East and West in a positive way. And all of a sudden, like China and Chinese was just super taboo. And so, like, it was something that I didn't promote at the time of its publication as much as I could have, should have, would have, because of the global crises. But it's an exceptional book. I was rereading it the other day and inspiring myself. Um, so I'm proud of them all. My first book, The Complete Patriot's Guide, is a cursed political inspiration. It's so, and I say it's cursed because it deals with the cursed politics of the cursed subject of politics. But it's I think inspirational and an instigation of consciousness itself. And I was inspired to write that by way of the book within the book 1984. In 1984, the main character gets a hold of a book, and I modeled my book on the nonfiction version of that fictional book. So I'm proud of them all. A couple of them are little digital books that are silly and not whatever, but
Yeah, I mean, so that's an idea that you talk about a lot is this idea of joining the East and West. Um, I guess, how do you envision that?
Well, in practical political terms, I'm not sure I could, the way that people are so competitive and adamant and monothematic about their jingoistic pursuits. I don't know if if I have an answer for that necessarily, but I think that the philosophical joining or finding the relationships or the correspondences between the East and West, or even how the East can help the West and how the West can help the East, in complementary kind of symbological, psychological references, um, would be a start. But as it is right now, the East is not even the East, I would say, right? Like some of the best Taoist, Kung Fu, Tai Chi instructors long fled China. Some of the best Tibetan Buddhist teachers and gurus also, they left Tibet because it's a collectivist communist nation. It's, it was founded on the Cultural Revolution, which was intended to stomp out all these, what they considered, what I might call spookism ideas, right? A lot of the stuff was, you could find flaws in the belief systems, certainly. Tai Chi, Qigong, and related, they could not get rid of, even in the Cultural Revolution, because it is and was so beneficial to people. They would practice it in the dark and they would share it in prohibitive um, conditions. It is so beneficial that it survived the Cultural Revolution, where they wanted to get rid of all that. But now, of course, it's celebrated as Chinese, and it should be. But I would say that communism is actually, dare I say, a perverted political system from the West, uh, Germany, and people can say that Marx was this or that, but he was from Germany, and now it has taken over China via Russia. So even China is got a lot of problems, to where it's not of the Tao, really, right? It's not of these Eastern teachings that we might celebrate in being from this area. It's been taken over. And as I said, I've met some amazing Tibetan Buddhist teachers and Tai Chi related Qigong practitioners and teachers from China, and they were not intending on going back, because it's so repressive there. There's also, as the yin yang kind of model predicts, in a sense, and demonstrates and illustrates, there's an ebb and flow to cultural conditions. Um, when things are really repressive for a while, the result of that is people will maybe walk away from it, or fight it, or just not be down with it in one way or another. There is of course, it's impossible to measure how many people there are, but there's a small movement, more than likely, in China, of people going to the mountains and becoming more Taoist, like the old school ways there. But mostly people are hyper materialistic and, Western oriented in the East already, but in the bad way. There is an expression in Taoism: if you seek a long life, stay out of the city.
I just moved out of the city, and it has done wonders for my health.
Beautiful.
So,
Yeah,
okay.
the things about cities that were available back then are the same now, right? I mean, I live in the boondocks and the country too, if you will. And whenever I go to a city, or which is just a bigger towns, really, it's just fast food everywhere, right? Like I never eat fast food. I don't really, you know, like it to even have be tempted by it. But I'm like, wow, like you, no wonder, like you just have access to that all day and you don't really trip on what you're eating. Like, no wonder people are not healthy. Just a small example of like, yeah, don't move to the city because materialism and gains and people are on a mission and this and that in cities.
Yeah, I find too it's just there's so much more peace in the country, and it's just slower moving, it's quieter, there's less not to be weird, but like EMFs and stuff. I mean, less pollution, less constant stimulation. Cities, it's just so much going on, so many cars, so many noises. It's actually kind of, I think, can be overwhelming and draining after a while.
Sure. And it's a good example too of thinking how we condition ourselves to things. Humans can adapt like crazy. Sometimes our adaptations will be malformations, right? Like if you adapted to an aggressive, that's probably not good. If you've adapted to living in a war, that's not good. We can adapt to these things. But once we get into a state where we're adapted to a hyper aggressive environment, we don't even realize that we're in erratic or a anxious state, right? Until we leave it. Or, like I said, until you practice Tai Chi or get a massage. And then you go, oh, wait, the masseuse would be like, "What are you holding so much tension? Where? I don't feel anything." And then you, oh yeah, that. Oh, okay. An example.
It would be such a great story, like a CEO type businessman goes to learn from a Tai Chi instructor or something. So, okay,
Yeah.
the book of the Tao of Thoth, sorry. Why Thoth?
Well, I am. I, I've always wanted to be a writer. My dad is a writer, and I always was trying to impress and compete with my dad, and so I think I may have wanted to do it because of him. But I always wanted to be a writer, and so I've always had an affinity towards the gods of writers. And in studying the esoteric and the occult or spirituality, Thoth is inevitably going to come up, right? And actually, the fourth initiation, I get into different iterations of Thoth or Tahuti as well. But I, I originally started the Tao of Thoth because I was sure that there was a relationship with the seven and the eight. In researching the four, I had found so many examples, as I express in that Jungian quote, there are three, but where's the fourth? There are so many examples of trinities that are lacking or that have an unsaid fourth part. And I was looking at the Bagua of China, or the Tao and the I Ching, these primal sets of elements. And the Bagua means set of eight, I believe, something eight anyway. And uh, I was looking at them as elemental lessons as well as divination tools. And it occurred to me that the Kybalion and many different systems, of course, have the seven. And it struck me that there were all these systems that had an overt seven and an unsaid eighth. And I was looking for a parallel with the Eastern system of the Bagua, the set of eight of the Tao, of these eight primal elements that are used for divination practices and um, energy quality understandings too. And when combined in with different when one of the elements is combined with another element, we get 64 potentials out of the Bagua. The trigrams become the hexagrams of the I Ching. The I Ching has these 64 potentials. But again, all based on this overt eight and seven. Again, the yoga systems of today have, of course, the seven chakras. And in the past, actually, there were often known as five. There are often five chakras. Most importantly, the relationship of that is the heart is at center in both the five and the seven, I think. But of course, there are many different chakras or in Taoism and Tai Chi. There's many different energy points. The more we notice, like people want to, new age people that haven't studied chakra system much might want to notice their chakras. In fact, we're trying to really tonify and clear our chakras. They are an energy wheel, right? So uh, if you look at the seven chakra system, it actually corresponds beautifully with the seven lessons of the Kybalion. I'm not trying to say that the Kybalion is, thereby ancient and thereby valuable. But I am saying it's definitely a valuable work. And again, it has the seven what I call tenets of Thoth, or it has the seven principles that one can understand philosophically and metaphysically, and it's an exceptional book. And so I was thinking that in the East you have the Bagua, and in the West you have all kinds of different sets of seven. But where's the eighth? And then, of course, I found the eight meters of Egyptian cosmology. They are the primal gods of Egypt. And in fact, the city of their worship was Kemetu or something. Forgive me the name, Egyptian name, but it was what we now call Hermopolis, after Hermes, after Tahuti or Thoth. And so the Tahuti's city, it literally meant city of eight, and for the eight meters. And so there was some profound correspondence there, and my intention was to have an internal arts lesson in each of these seven principles related to the Kybalion, and these principles are certainly demonstrated in different Taoist and even Taiji lessons and philosophies. Of course, polarity is very much in the yin yang symbol overtly, and consciousness. It all starts with mind. All of this um, correspondence is there. And so I, in the Tao of Thoth, I present philosophical and techniques or philosophical ideas to embody these lessons. And in researching it, I found Mark Passio had gone there already. His video on the let's see, I think he calls it the flower of life, because the or the seed of life. Anyway, he explores the seven tenets and unsaid eighth tenet of related to the Kybalion. And in Tai Chi, one of the primary qualities that we develop and thereby can use, but it's also needed to learn. But as we learn, we develop it and have more of it, is patience. You have to develop patience to learn Tai Chi or Kung Fu or meditation or read a book even. And so I was looking at that quality, and he termed it as the eighth tenet as care. And patient caring is what I call the eighth tenet. Mark Passio calls it care. I was looking at it as patience. And so that is like, if you look at the seed of life, it is made up of seven circles, and an eighth circle encapsulates it. Without caring patience, learning and philosophical and physical embodiment is less useful. With patience, it adds the quality that really brings it all about. So my intention with the Tao of Thoth was to unite through that eight. And in other respects too, as I researched systems, I found many having to do with eight in that respect, and or you might call them four pair, and many different systems that have the four too, which always, in a sense, these correspondences, I think, link together at least the format of our perspectives, if not this kind of the elemental sensibility of things, even.
Is that what that book is about? The Tao
Yeah,
of
yeah,
Thoth? It's
yeah.
very interesting. And it's interesting too, because I mean, some people do relate Thoth to Mercury, and Mercury is associated with the nervous system. Um, you also have quite a fascination with like nuclear weapons and uh, nuclear energy.
Yeah,
And
nuclear experimentation, as I call it.
uh, sure. I know you've written a couple of books related to that, but um, yeah, of course, I had to ask you about that as well.
Thank you.
What do you think are the scariest aspects of all this nuclear experimentation?
Well, it is a format of institutional control. It is a hyper rare resource that we mine and refine and burn. It's the same. They try to differentiate this format from the petrol energy systems. It's actually the same. We mine it, we refine it, and we burn it. Same thing with nuclear experimentation. It's a mine, refine, and a light. Maybe it's not burn, but we set it alight. And basically, in nuclear power experiments, we boil water. And Einstein said that's one hell of a way to boil water. That's what he said about nuclear experimentation, power generation. Um, there's a quote by a Green Party politician. I can't remember his name, but essentially it goes, if Americans could see nuclear radiation as they could see oil leaks, everyone would be burning candles and demanding the end of nuclear energy. The facilitation of it is actually dire in the sense that we've set up a system of waste storage that insists we will solve problems that are here now, and we will solve them later because we will get smarter. That's a big gamble. So we've essentially set up, you know, the poisonous material of the sun, we've ignited it on Earth. So I think the biggest factor of nuclear experimentation is actually the slow toxicity increase through these radioactive elements rather than the destruction of the detonation potentials. Obviously, those are world ending and life ending, and actually remove all beings' ability to defend themselves, because it's like the radiation poisoning is sometimes uh, referred to as like an, a thousand knives, a wound of a thousand knives, because these particles just go right through you. So the people that had a high acute exposure, say at Chernobyl, say any number of facilitators at different experiments, it's literally you get zapped with hot particles. It goes right through your organs, and you basically, that causes all kinds of problems. So I think the incessant slow pollution of it scares me the most. But at a more kind of bigger picture sensibility about it, petroleum is one of the most effective ways that people are controlled in this world. And so is nuclear power generation. Again, same format. And what I mean by that is, look what's happening in the world right now. Um, World War One wouldn't have happened without oil, and those who don't know, World War Two on the American side, we started prohibiting oil to Japan, and they were left with no choice but to attack. They said they would attack. So oil is not only the cause of war, and it is also the fuel of it, literally, and as we see right now politically. Um, um, so it's interesting that nuclear power generation is promoted throughout the developed world. Of course, the developed world prohibits certain people from having it, but actually, Iran does have an operating nuclear power generation experiment, as I call it, or a nuclear power plant. All these horrible systems like war and industry and so forth, they have wonderful euphemisms in them, right? A power plant, like a plant, is a nice natural thing, right? Well, industrial power plants are anything but. So Iran does have a working nuclear power facility. Any country with a working nuclear power generation experiment and ballistic missiles does have the capability for an atomic weapon, maybe not nuclear, but for an atomic weapon within a certain time period. So uh, um, it basically, these two energy resource uh, resources of control. Um, and a direct example I lay out in my book, The Terrorist Letters. It's fiction, but it's been accused of being nonfiction. It has a whole archontic, parasitic storyline in it, but the main characters are fighting the nuclear experiment. And in that book, I contrast nuclear power generation promotion with cannabis cultivation prohibition, because actually hemp and cannabis are the most resource freeing plants that there are. We can get oil for oil is oil, right? You can burn it, you can do whatever with hemp oil. So we can get oil, we can get textile resources, we can make plastic out of it. We can actually, it tricks me all the time that I'm feeling happy. So it's a gentle narcotic. I'm trying to be funny. It's a one of the best forms of human nutrition on the planet by itself. Hemp seed has all kinds of fats and proteins that we need. Almost, if you were stuck on a desert island and you could have one thing, hemp would be it. It's a complete human nutrition map. It covers all the bases. In fact, it's more than likely that we started agriculture for weed to change our head, not for wheat. It was second. Wheat and other grains were secondary to cannabis cultivation. That's why we know today there's two different types of cannabis. Are they different? No, they're not. They've been agriculturally manipulated to, for one, like hemp, to produce oil and textile, and two, Indian hemp, to get us stoned and make us feel happy for a moment. So it's not only a harmless drug, we've actually integrated it so much with our biological being that we have the cannabinoid endocrine system. Our bodies are basically part of our cellular structure have open gloves for as cannabinoid receptors, and it's basically a nutrient, right? We don't have cocaine receptors, we don't have any other form of receptors like that for any other narcotic, if you will. We have a whole biological need that's been prevented for many years in the form of cannabis. And again, oldest, more than likely, oldest cultivated plant on the planet. So if I would say that marijuana is not illegal. Excuse me, hemp is not illegal because of marijuana. Marijuana is illegal because of hemp. It would literally be the biggest counter to globalization. What is the opposite of globalization? It's not nationalism, it's localization. And actually, Diesel designed his engine to empower local communities by being able to burn anything. Oil is oil is oil. Put it in a diesel engine. It would have worked. Now we have different that are a bit more temperamental and designed only for petroleum fuels. But again, biodiesel is a thing, and the only difference with those engines is the gaskets are more acidic proof. So oil is oil is oil. If hemp were legal, there's no way we would allow nuclear experimentation and these petroleum oligarchs to bring us into more wars for resources so that they can get rich. It's all it's amazing how much tools these have been to war on us. And hemp would, I know I sound like a hippie, but I hope I presented the facts adequately. Hemp and cannabis would be the complete counter to these oligarchical resource constraints, right? They are resources, but look how they set us up.
Yeah, I remember that presentation you did on the occult rejects about marijuana and the uh,
Divine feminine.
yeah, the divine feminine. That was super fascinating. Like the how breast milk has cannabinoids in it, doesn't it?
Right.
Eh,
Right.
And
Our
also,
very breast milk that we start with, even with mothers that have no exposure to the plant properties, it is being elicited by the mother to the child to, they theorize, do two things: to calm the anxiety, like, yo, you just appeared in the world, like even a loud noise or a whistle is like, what was that? So it's about calming anxiety and giving a little bit of marijuana. Cannabis is an organ expander. Tobacco is an organ shrinker. Excuse me, I forget the exact terminology. I'm I sound silly there, but the constriction and expansion. And so when this cannabinoid receptors are activated, the baby's stomach grows, and it might therefore be inspired to eat. And everyone knows you gotta sometimes, hey kid, you gotta eat, right? So it calms and brings some appetite stimulant to the little ones, which is amazing.
yeah, that was a great episode. So hopefully anyone watching will go check that one out as well. And I think you even talk about the seven in that one, obviously, because there's seven leaves. And uh, did you talk about Thoth's counterpart? I'm forgetting her name, but
Uzi.
I always, yeah, how she's got that seven leaf plant on her head. And I forget what
Right.
they, I always thought that was
And
quite interesting.
she may be related to the other healing goddess of the Taoist pantheon, or maybe spectrum of beings and gods and goddesses is more accurate. There is Magu. And it's interesting. One of the things that I wrote the book, The Prohibition of Marijuana and the Divine Feminine. And it blows my mind. So people should check it out. And obviously, that Occult Rejects episode, I lay it down pretty thoroughly, the book ideas. It's very interesting. Um, Speaking of little ones, and in reference to the primal nature of humanity, one of the first words we all enunciate is ma, mama. That is, and it probably is, possibly is rather, because it is the easiest enunciation that a little mouth that doesn't know how to speak can make. And so, mostly the first word that a baby will say is mama, ma. And it's interesting that all around the world, this is the enunciation or vocalization for feminine, for the feminine. Not with certainty, but it's almost everywhere. Magu, this goddess of uh, healing, and more specifically herbal healing in China, she is also the goddess of cannabis, right? So it's the man and the healing
Oh, you
is
cut
all
out.
right there. And allopathy, oh, well, I was saying that in Magu, we have the embodiment of these qualities of marijuana and the divine feminine and healing and herbalism and all these wonderful things that one might relate to in times past, maybe the feminine healer nearby, right? And before allopathy kicked in, feminine healers with herbs was where you went. In fact, one of the early medical manuals in the United States, if you looked up anything having to do with dermal inflammation or dermal problems, skin problems of any sort, that it said see hemp oil. All of them just directed you to hemp oil because it basically is a cure all. I've used it on wounds before that were sure to scar. It has anti scarring properties. Absolutely. It is a wonderful, and this is not me just saying this. This has been proved by science too, but I saw it myself as well. So yeah, Magu embodies all of these things, and allopathy really was founded by people that wanted to rid the world further of feminine healing, and we see this being mixed up in um, in the early colonial times of the USA, when people were variously accused of being witches. Well, they no, she was just a midwife and a healer, oftentimes, right? She's just a feminine healer of new herbs. Um, so that this kind of this energy of getting rid of and prohibiting the feminine healer and getting rid of and prohibiting marijuana and cannabis is the same orientation. And again, we have cannabinoid receptors in our body. We don't have psychedelic receptors. None of that. It's totally every other drug is different.
Pretty crazy. Um, I'm wondering, are you writing anything now? Are you
I've been writing several articles recently. I don't have a book in mind right now. I just finished an article that's exoteric, kind of, if you will, in regards to the uh, quarter millennial of the United States, and how if we how this country was great when we were more literate and therefore had more comprehension. It's essentially the gist of the article. um, I have a new article that I'm going to start working on now since I've finished that, um, which is about the 40, and I mentioned this to you, and in looking into the Bagua and the correspondence in Egyptian philosophy and spirituality. Of course, I mentioned before, there's the 64 hexagrams. When you combine the 8 trigrams with each other possibility of a different trigram, there's 60 potentials. um, in Egypt, there is, I believe it's Heket measurement system, which is actually it unfolds in exactly the same manner, um, but in contrast. And it is a measurement system that is based on 1/2, 1/4, 1/4, 1/8, 1/32, 1/32, whatever, however you say that, and one. Um, and there's actually in total there six. They leave one part missing, so the total there is 63/64. Um, And so I was looking at this with Headless, and he presented the idea to divide 64, the main number in these corresponding measurement systems. That measurement system of the Hecate um, grain measurement system in Egypt is also more esoterically related to the Eye of Ra, where the Eye of Ra depicts the different influences of our consciousness, beginning with one half of being from our olfactory senses, right? So it's this whole consciousness measurement system as well as a grain measurement system in the 63rd, 64ths relative to the 64 of the Bagua. And Headless, we were discussing this, and Headless said, well, on further discussion, what about dividing 64 by phi, which is in, it could be 1.618 or 1.6. And when you divide 64 by 1.6, you get 40, which I thought was a really powerful equation. And especially in regards to these numbers on by themselves. But 64, all these aspects, or both of these aspects of the Eye of Ra and its 63, 64, and the Bagua and its 64, are about consciousness. And 40 is the number that's repeated in the Bible as a time period of the development of consciousness. It is an initiatory time period in these ancient teachings, not only the Bible, but this is where we see 40 days and 40 nights onto all the significant events in the Bible, many of them anyway. The flooding of the earth being the first one, I believe, and crossing the desert, so on and so forth. Initiatory measurement system, I believe, and there's another one I actually was reminded of listening to your show with Jin. Jin actually mentioned this before too, the 64 dakinis, or goddesses of the Buddhist cosmology. I'm sure there is a relationship to pan out there. And the 40 also is, I think, in part. Oh, whoops, did I cut out? Sorry, I'll continue. I don't know if I skipped out there or not, but the 40 also, I think it comes from or relates to the Tetractys, which depicts or is used often enough to in correspondence with the presentation of the Tetragrammaton, or the name of God, in Greek understandings. But the Tetractys, it actually is all about geometry. You mentioned Pythagorean concepts earlier. The Pythagoreans were all about 4 and the Tetractys, which actually depicts the 4 and the 10. And not only were they about the 4, but they were like me, obsessed with the 4 dimensions of geometry. And the Tetractys, in a triangular presentation, has the point at the top, and the point, these are geometrical symbological things. That's why they were into the 4. 1 point is for 1 point. The next line is 2 points. 2 points is the minimal number of points you need for a line. And the next line is 3 points. 3 points is the minimal number of points you need for a plane. And the bottom level is 4 points. 4 points is the minimal number of points you need for a solid. So they were in their celebration of 4 and 10, literally obsessing over geometry. And as I look at it, geometry. I'm horrible at mathematics, by the way, but geometry is obviously a way to understand physics and measure the external reality. Meditation is the way to understand internal dynamics and internal reality. And it's another example where this kind of mindfulness and geometry understanding comes into play. Anytime people I tell you normally if I tell people and they don't know my book that I'm interested in sacred geometry, not that that comes up necessarily without people knowing me, but they think I might be a visual artist, right? No, geometry is much more about energy comprehension, just like it's about space comprehension in its internal arts or esoteric lessons.
Yeah, it makes me think in astrology too, there's all sorts of that kind of thing, like 90 degrees, like a square would be like tension, and um,
Mm.
a trine is an amplification, and a sextile is um, a harmony. Is there anything that you have been like studying recently that you've been really excited about? I guess that what you just talked about is
Um,
probably a big one.
Yeah, yeah, that's my current finding. Again, I've looked into the 4 and the 10 and the 40 quite a bit by way of my book, The Fourth Initiation. That's in there, but I didn't get that um, uh, uh, equation until recently. So it's just kind of a new look at the 40 through the 64 that yeah I'm currently fleshing out. I recently um, I've made a few videos recently on the sacred geometry in Plato's writing, and I'll be doing a few more of those. So I've been rereading Plato a bit and looking at it in terms of meditation and geometrical kind of understandings, which some of it is overtly there. Geometry is overtly mentioned a bit in Greek writings, of course, Pythagoras, as I just mentioned, and Plato as well. Famously, the mystery schools would have the Plato's schools would have the expression over the doorway, "Let none ignorant of geometry enter." So it was one of the kind of starting points.
Well, I won't take too much more of your time.
No,
Thanks.
that's 2 hours. That went so quick. Thank you so much, Eros. That was awesome.
It was great. Yeah, I really appreciate you coming on. Is there anything that you want to plug? I did put um your X and your Weebly um
Dope.
website in the description.
Great. Thank you so much. Yeah, that's awesome. And yeah, anyone who feels like communicating, I'm always open and I enjoy communicating with people. So yeah, hit me up on X and my honor to speak with you, Eros. Super glad to know you.
If someone were to wanted to start reading some of your work, what would you say, what book would you recommend they start with?
Well, maybe whichever one calls to them. I guess I'm the most popular one, so it must be what is most. I don't know what is most rewarding for people is the geometry of energy, by far. The geometry of energy, how to meditate. It is definitely the most popular. The fourth initiation is my most recent and has, I think, some really mind blowing inspirational initiatory understandings. The Tao of Thoth is super valuable and very much an instigation of consciousness. And 108 too is a whole window of understanding into of itself. The 108 kind of idea is very valuable meditation kind of lessons in there. Um, the Matrix of Four too is where kind of it all started for me in a sense, all the esoteric and the four obsession.
Awesome. Yes, a just a lot of work out there from Ethan. Definitely check it out. Check out the links in the description. His books, you can find them in the link in that description, links to his books. Um, and thank you so much, Ethan, for coming on. Thanks
Thank
everyone
you.
for joining us. Have a great night.